Hey everyone, it's PL Stewart here, and I'm back with another video. This video is my top two books, and it's not really a top two books, it's really a top one and a top one. So this video is which books are my favorite traditionally published and favorite self-published science fiction and fantasy book of the first third of 2024. So I know typically a lot of booktubers use quarters to divide the year into, and that's quite standard in all sorts of things, including business. Um, I've always liked, for some reason, just my weird idiosyncrasy, I've liked dividing things into threes, including the year. And mind you, that's probably contrary because, I mean, for example, seasons, 4 seasons. But some about me, I just like these threes. I divide my books in the John King saga into 3 parts each. I like things in threes. So, in any case, that's me. So, I the first third is pretty low for me. I'm reading one book now that's physical, that's really good, but it definitely won't be. There's no possibility that could overtake my number one traditionally published book. So this book I'm talking about reading physically, it is a traditionally published book. There's absolutely no way it could, as good as it is, it can never overtake the number one traditionally published science fiction fantasy book that I've read in the first third of this year. And I am currently also reading one indie book. That's so a book that's self-published. Excuse me again. Yeah, it's not going to overtake my, as good as it is, it's definitely not going to overtake my number one indie small press book of the first third of 2024. So I know that even the thumbnail says top two, so it's top two books, but really it's a top one scenario as well. I do want to always make the distinction that the reason I do a top indie and a top traditionally published book is not because I think one method of publication is better, that indie books are better than trad books, or that trad books are better than indie books. I simply do it to feature more books. So, for example, typically at the end of the year, I post a top 10 indie science fiction fantasy books of the year and a top 10 trad science fiction fantasy books of the year, or top 20 or of each. And that is simply so that I can feature more books. Because if I made just one top 10 list, every year my TBR looks different. I might read more traditionally published books one year or more indie book published books next year. So my top list could feature, say, for example, 7 traditionally published books and only 3 indies, or feature, 7 indies and 3 trad books. And I just feel like I want to feature more books. So the more lists I make, and in this case too, it's not onerous anyway. That's how I'm able to feature more books, by making these 2 separate lists. So, excuse me. So this is my top one traditionally published science fiction fantasy book for the first third of 2024. And those of you who know me and watch anything that I've ever said or written in the last few months can probably guess what that book is going to be. So that book is going to be Song of the Mysteries by Janny Wurts. This is book 11, the final ultimate volume in the Wars of Light and Shadow. No surprises here. I have had the enormous privilege of receiving an arc of this from Janny. I want to thank Nico's book reviews as well, because Janny had sent Nico the arc, and Nico had passed it on to me as per Janny's request. And this book will probably go elsewhere to some very privileged reviewers. So I'm extremely fortunate to get this, and thank you so much, Janny Wurts, again for assuring that I got this, and thanks, Nico, for facilitating that. This book, I mean, what can I say? You can see my review of this book on Goodreads and on Before We Go blog. There's absolutely zero spoilers. Reviewing a book like this, it was impossible to do without spoilers. I felt there's very few books I feel that way, but this was one. This is a series that has been decades and decades in the making, And this is, for me, easily the best final book in any series. This was masterful to pull together all the plot threads and to have all the nuances that, and to, it is just absolutely stupendous. So this book is easily my number one book of the first third of the year. And again, I know it's early. I know I'm shot calling here, but I cannot see a scenario under which this is not my ultimate number one traditionally published book by the end of the year. I make no secret that Janny Wurts is my favorite author, and I make no secret that no one writes like her. And to be able to read the final book in her main series, this is it's momentous to be able to, it's monumental to be able to read this. And the enjoyment level was just simply off the charts, and the satisfaction level, and also for Janny, the author, to know that she's finished this series, this labor of love that's taken decades. And so now with a finished series, I think that Janny, as some people will now start the series because they know it's finished. I think very soon, once people continue to read Janny's work, continue to read this series, and are more open to reading it now that it's finished, that this will definitely, for a lot of people who perhaps may not have been considering this series, Wars of Light and Shadow, this will definitely, for a lot of new readers, become their favorite fantasy series. Ask Nico's book reviews. For a long time, The Wheel of Time was irreplaceable in Nico's mind. And after he finished Words of Light and Shadow, he was a convert. This is his number one series, and I'm so happy about that. Nico's a great guy, and he deserves to have a new number one series like this. No disrespect to Robert Jordan. Robert Jordan is also iconic, but Janny Wurts is definitely, and this is, again, I sound like a broken record, but you won't hear this just from me. She's criminally underrated as an author. This series is masterclass and will surely take its place in the pantheon of great all-time science fiction fantasy series now that it is completed. So kudos to Janny Wurts. This book is coming out in May. And, for those of you who are waiting for this book and you finished the series up to this point, this last unpublished book, congratulations to you. Kudos. You'll finally get to read it, and you're in for something really special. So now, that was my favorite traditionally published science fiction and fantasy book for the first third of the year. My favorite indie or small press top number one science fiction fantasy book for the first of the year took me by complete surprise. There were some other fantasy books that were definitely in the running and kind of jostling for position, and I was going to have to pick and choose. It was going to be a tough choice to pick from some really amazing books what was going to be number one on the indie side. But when I read this book, and I just read it recently, this barely made it in. Like, this was, I read this month, and I was gobsmacked. I was stupefied. And this was a book, more importantly than it being a great book, an extremely well-written book, this was a book I needed to read, and this was a book that I didn't know I needed to read. And that book is Pluralities by Avi Silver. This book is science fiction, kind of dystopian fantasy, and also, space opera. It's got so many fantastic elements thematically. It's the writing and the prose is absolutely fabulous. You may have talked about short fiction before, and that short fiction, it's a rare skill to be able to write short fiction, in that to condense and be able to convey really compelling themes, create world building, amazing characterizations, fabulous prose, to pack all the best elements of any book in a book that's like this thin is fabulous. And I can't say enough about this book. Excuse me, but the reason why this book is so incredible for me is that it really hit home in that this book is very much about the sometimes absolutely traumatic and but also joyous journey towards gender euphoria. And for someone like me who I read this book because I wanted to learn more. I wanted to feel, that I was trying to make an effort to learn more about that subject. And as someone who considers themselves an ally of the LGBTQI plus community, I felt that this was a book that I needed to read because I heard so much about it. It's actually the wonderful Edie Bell, who I just interviewed yesterday on my channel, who introduced this book. This book is published by Emily's Publishing Small Press Company, and I'm going to have the extreme honor of interviewing the author very soon on my channel for 6 Elemental Interviews. Avi Silver is the author, and I'm very grateful to her for being willing to grant me an interview. And I'm very grateful to Edie Bell for putting me onto this book. Check out, by the way, of course, my interview with Edie Bell. She's she's an incredible person. So warm, so very engaging and witty and funny and smart, and just someone you really would gravitate towards. So that was a great interview. Check that out. That was just yesterday. But this book is, again, this is a book I didn't expect to read. It's a book I didn't expect to put in any top list, but it is catapulted over a lot of other amazing books to be my number one indie/small press science fiction or fantasy book of the first third of this year. So those are my picks. I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot more about those books as the year progresses. For The Song of the Mysteries, again, I do have a written review for that book. Post on Goodreads, post on Before We Go blog, where I'm assistant editor under the weather for Beth Tabler's leadership. And shout out to Beth Tabler and all the great peeps on Before We Go blog. Coincidentally, check out Taylor from Maybe Did Pages, my co-host, Page Chewing, my awesome co-host. We just did a live on Saturday entitled Big Brain Energies, and featuring the amazing John Morrow, who is one of the best reviewers out there with a written review in our space, an assistant editor Before We Go blog, an academic, a fabulous person, and he was on there. So check out that live with some other amazing intellectuals like Janny Wurts, who I just mentioned, Philip Chase, author of the Dan Trilogy and beloved booktuber, and the nemesis, the brilliant Dr. A.P. Canavan of A Critical Dragon. So in any event, that's my number one indie and number one trad science fiction fantasy book for the first third of the year. And I definitely will be publishing one for the second third, and finally an overall one at the end of the year. So thanks so much for listening, and we will talk to you soon.